Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I swear, every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that dimly lit bar, the smell of cheap beer and desperation hanging thick in the air. It's like a twisted movie reel stuck on repeat, the same scene playing over and over, each time sharper, more vivid, more horrifying. It all started with Tinder, of course. Where else do these things begin? I was newly single, nursing a broken heart and a bruised ego, and looking for something. Validation? A distraction? I don't know. Whatever it was, Tinder seemed like the easiest way to find it. I swiped and swiped, fueled by wine and a misguided belief that somewhere out there, a perfect match was waiting. And then there was him. Alex, his profile said. He was handsome, in a rugged, slightly dangerous way. Dark eyes, a chiseled jawline, and a smoldering gaze that seemed to pierce right through the screen. His bio was short and intriguing. Looking for someone to get lost with. Stupidly, foolishly, I swiped right. And he swiped right back. We started chatting, and he was charming, funny, and surprisingly intelligent. He asked about my interests, my dreams, my fears. He actually seemed to listen when I talked, which was a refreshing change from the usual Tinder drivel. We messaged back and forth for a few days, and I found myself getting increasingly excited about the prospect of meeting him. Maybe, just maybe, this was the real thing. Maybe Tinder wasn't just a wasteland of hookups and disappointment. Maybe I could actually find someone worthwhile. We made plans to meet at a bar downtown, a place I'd never been to before. It was a dive, the kind of place where the music was too loud, the drinks were too strong, and the clientele was interesting, to say the least. But I was trying to be adventurous, to step outside my comfort zone. So I went. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a dimly lit table in the corner. He looked even better in person. The ruggedness was amplified, the danger more palpable. He stood up when he saw me, a smile playing on his lips. "You made it," he said, his voice low and husky. I smiled back, trying to hide my nervousness. Wouldn't miss it. We talked for hours, or at least it felt like hours. The conversation flowed easily, effortlessly. He told me about his travels, his work as a freelance photographer, his passion for obscure films. I told him about my job, my friends, my failed relationship. He listened intently, his dark eyes never leaving mine. He made me feel like I was the only person in the room, the only person in the world. As the night wore on, we started drinking more. The strong cocktails loosened my inhibitions, and I found myself getting more and more comfortable, more and more vulnerable. He started touching me, casually at first, a hand on my arm, a brush against my leg. But then the touches became more deliberate, more intimate. He leaned in close, his breath warm on my neck, and whispered, "You're beautiful." I blushed, feeling a thrill course through me. I hadn't felt this kind of attraction in a long time. We left the bar together, walking hand in hand down the dark city streets. He hailed a cab, and we climbed in, heading back to his place. I knew I shouldn't be doing this. I knew I was moving too fast, taking too many risks. But I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to him, like a moth to a flame. His apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but it had a certain bohemian charm. Books were piled high on shelves, and photographs lined the walls. It felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could be myself. We kissed, and it was electric. His lips were soft and warm, his touch gentle but firm. I felt myself melting into him, losing myself in the moment. We ended up in his bedroom, undressing each other slowly, savoring each touch, each kiss. The sex was incredible, passionate, and intense. I felt like I was floating, weightless, lost in a sea of pleasure. Afterward, we lay in bed, tangled in each other's arms, talking and laughing. I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't felt in years. Maybe I thought this was it. Maybe I had finally found someone who truly understood me, someone who truly cared. But then, things started to change. As I lay there, half asleep, I noticed a strange smell in the room, a musty, almost metallic odor. I couldn't quite place it, but it made me feel uneasy. I also noticed that Alex had become strangely quiet. He was staring at the ceiling, his expression blank, almost vacant. "Are you okay?" I asked, gently touching his arm. He didn't respond. He just kept staring, his eyes unfocused. "Alex," I said again, my voice rising in concern. He turned to me slowly, his eyes now filled with a cold, chilling intensity. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. I tried to get out of bed, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't leave," he said, his voice now a low growl. "I'm not finished with you yet." I tried to pull away, but he held on tight, his fingers digging into my skin. I started to panic. "Let me go," I said, my voice trembling. He laughed, a cold, cruel sound that sent a wave of terror through me. "You think you can just walk away? You think you can just use me and then leave? You're wrong." He pushed me back down onto the bed, his body looming over mine. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth with his hand, muffling my cries. "Be quiet," he hissed. "I don't want anyone to hear you." He started kissing me again, but this time it wasn't gentle or passionate. It was rough and forceful, almost violent. I struggled against him, trying to push him away, but he was too strong. He started tearing at my clothes, ripping them off my body. I cried out, tears streaming down my face. "Please," I begged, "don't do this." He ignored me. He continued to assault me, his movements becoming more and more brutal. I closed my eyes, praying for it to end. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, a never-ending cycle of pain and terror. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, it was over. He rolled off me, his body limp and exhausted. I lay there, sobbing, my body bruised and broken. I felt like I had been violated, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. He got up and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. He didn't say a word. I slowly got dressed, my hands shaking. I wanted to run, to escape, but I was afraid. I didn't know what he would do if I tried to leave. I waited for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, he turned around, his expression unreadable. "You can go now," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the apartment, down the stairs, and into the street. I didn't stop running until I reached a police station. I told them everything, sobbing uncontrollably. They took me to a hospital, where I was examined and treated for my injuries. They also took a statement and launched an investigation, but they never found him. Alex had vanished, leaving no trace behind. His apartment was empty, his phone was disconnected, and his Tinder profile was gone. It was like he had never existed, but I knew he was real. I knew what he had done to me, and I knew that I would never be the same. I still have nightmares about that night. I see his face, hear his voice, feel his hands on my body. I wake up screaming, sweating, and shaking. I've tried to move on, to forget, but it's impossible. The trauma is too deep, the scars too raw. I'm afraid to trust anyone, afraid to open myself up to anyone. I'm afraid that every man I meet is just another Alex, waiting to prey on my vulnerability. Tinder is the last thing on my mind. Online dating is the last thing on my mind. Dating and relationships are the last thing on my mind. I know I need help, but I'm afraid to seek it. I'm afraid of reliving the horror, afraid of being judged, afraid of not being believed. So I suffer in silence, trapped in my own personal hell. The movie reel keeps replaying, the same scene over and over, each time sharper, more vivid, more horrifying. I don't know if I'll ever escape this nightmare. The memory and the replaying of the event is too vivid. I don't think I'll ever truly understand what happened that summer. It started like any other hot, boring summer in my hometown. I was 22, fresh out of college with a useless degree and zero prospects. My friends were all moving on, getting real jobs in real cities, while I was stuck back in the same old rut, living with my parents and working a dead-end job at the local grocery store. Boredom, I guess, is what led me to Tinder. I'd always been a bit of a late bloomer when it came to dating. I was shy, awkward, and never felt like I measured up to the other girls. Tinder felt like a safe way to put myself out there without the pressure of face-to-face interaction. You swipe, you match, you chat. It's all pretty superficial, but it seemed like a decent way to kill time, and maybe meet someone new. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to hang out with, maybe go on a few dates. I wasn't expecting to find the love of my life on a dating app. His profile was pretty standard. A couple of decent-looking pictures, a short bio about his love for hiking and craft beer. His name was Ethan, and he seemed normal. That was probably the most appealing thing about him. He wasn't overly attractive or trying too hard to be cool. He just seemed like a regular guy. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about our favorite movies, our plans for the summer, and our shared love of hiking. He was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly easy to talk to. After a few days of chatting, he asked me if I wanted to grab a coffee. I hesitated. Meeting up with someone from Tinder always felt a bit risky. You never really know who you're talking to behind the screen. But Ethan seemed genuine, and I was tired of sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. So I said yes. We met at a local coffee shop, and he was exactly as I pictured him, maybe even a little bit cuter in person. He had kind eyes and a warm smile, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked for hours, and I felt a connection with him that I hadn't felt with anyone before. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. Hikes, movies, dinners, all the typical stuff. But with Ethan, it felt different. I felt comfortable, safe, and like I could be myself around him. He listened to me, made me laugh, and seemed to genuinely care about what I had to say. I was falling hard. I know it sounds cliché, but it felt like a whirlwind romance. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. Then, things started to get weird. It started small. Little things that I initially dismissed as coincidences or my own overactive imagination. He would show up at places I hadn't told him I would be. He would reference conversations we'd had that I didn't remember having. He would know things about me that I hadn't told him. At first, I thought maybe I was just being forgetful or misremembering things. But the incidents kept happening, becoming more frequent and more unsettling. One night, I was talking to my best friend, Sarah, on the phone, complaining about my job. I mentioned that I was thinking about quitting and trying to find something else. The next day, Ethan brought up the conversation, asking me what kind of job I was looking for. I was shocked. I hadn't told him anything about that conversation. "How did you know about that?" I asked him, my voice trembling. He just smiled, a strange, unsettling smile that I'd never seen before. "I just know," he said. That's when I started to get scared. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Sarah had told him. Maybe I had mentioned it in passing and forgotten. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I started to pull away, making excuses to avoid seeing him. But he wouldn't let me. He kept calling, texting, showing up at my house unannounced. He was becoming increasingly possessive and controlling. One evening, I was at home alone when I heard a knock at the door. I peeked through the peephole and saw Ethan standing there, his face pale and drawn. I didn't want to open the door, but I was afraid of what he might do if I didn't. I opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock on. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice strained. "I don't want to talk to you," I said, trying to close the door. He pushed his way in, breaking the chain lock. I screamed and ran back, trying to get away from him. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. "You can't leave me," he said, his eyes wild and desperate. "We're meant to be together." I struggled against him, kicking and screaming. He wouldn't let go. I was terrified. I don't know what would have happened if my dad hadn't come home at that moment. He heard the commotion and burst into the living room, yelling at Ethan to get out of the house. Ethan finally released me and ran out the door, disappearing into the night. I was shaken, but physically unharmed. We called the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do since he hadn't actually hurt me. They took a statement and told me to get a restraining order. I got the restraining order, but it didn't make me feel any safer. I knew Ethan wouldn't just disappear. He was obsessed with me, and I was afraid of what he might do. I started sleeping with a baseball bat next to my bed. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and avoided going out alone. I was living in a constant state of fear. A few weeks later, I was driving home from work when I noticed a car following me. It was Ethan's car. My heart started pounding in my chest. I tried to lose him, but he stayed right behind me, tailgating me aggressively. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I sped up, hoping to get to a public place where I could get help. But Ethan kept following me, getting closer and closer. Suddenly, he swerved his car, hitting the back of my car. I lost control and spun out, crashing into a tree. Everything went black. I woke up in the hospital, my body aching all over. I had a concussion, a broken arm, and several cuts and bruises. But I was alive. The police told me that Ethan had been arrested. He had been stalking me for weeks, using social media and other online sources to track my movements. He had even hacked into my phone and computer to access my personal information. It turned out that Ethan wasn't who he said he was. He had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been using fake profiles on dating apps to lure women into relationships, only to become obsessive and controlling. I was one of his victims. It's been a few years since then, and I'm still trying to make sense of what happened. I'm still dealing with the trauma of the experience. I have nightmares, anxiety attacks, and a deep-seated fear of trusting anyone. I'll never use Tinder again. I'll never trust a dating app. I've learned that you can never really know who you're talking to online. People can create fake profiles, hide their true identities, and manipulate you into believing there's someone they're not. I was lucky to survive. Other women haven't been so lucky. I still don't understand why Ethan targeted me. What did he see in me that made him so obsessed? Was it just random chance, or was there something about me that made me more vulnerable to his manipulation? I may never know the answers to those questions, but I'm determined to move on with my life, to heal from the trauma, and to never let what happened to me define who I am. It's hard, but I'm trying. I'm seeing a therapist, talking to my friends and family, and focusing on my own well-being. I'm slowly starting to feel like myself again. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to trust someone completely again, but I'm open to the possibility of finding love again someday. I just need to be more careful, more cautious, and more aware of the red flags. Tinder wasn't just a dating app for me. It was a gateway to a nightmare, a reminder that the internet isn't always what it seems, and that danger can lurk behind even the most seemingly normal profiles. It taught me a harsh lesson about trust, vulnerability, and the importance of protecting myself in a world that can be both beautiful and terrifying. I'm still trying to make sense of it all, but I know one thing for sure. I'll never forget what happened that summer, and I'll never let it happen again. It started like any other Tinder conversation. A quick swipe right based on a semi-decent profile picture. Hiking gear, good. A witty bio, something about hating Mondays, relatable, and a mutual match. His name was Ben. His profile wasn't particularly memorable, just a regular-looking guy with a friendly smile and a couple of photos that suggested an outdoorsy lifestyle. Standard Tinder fare. Hey, I messaged, keeping it breezy. Hey, what brings you to this digital meat market? He replied almost instantly. I chuckled, just looking for someone to complain about Mondays with, I guess. And that was it. The conversation flowed easily from there. We talked about our jobs. He was a software developer. Our favorite hiking spots. He had a few I hadn't heard of. And our shared love of bad puns. He seemed normal. Refreshingly so, compared to some of the creeps and weirdos I'd encountered on the app. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. Again, standard. Coffee is the universal first date, a low-stakes way to see if there's any actual chemistry. I wasn't expecting much, but I was also open to the possibility of something more. The coffee date went well. He was just as funny and engaging in person as he was online. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. There wasn't any awkwardness, no forced conversation. It felt easy, almost too easy. We went on a few more dates after that. A hike, he really did know some great trails. A movie, dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant. Each date confirmed my initial impression. Ben was a genuinely nice guy. He was kind, considerate, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. I started to let my guard down, something I rarely did, especially with people I met online. That's when things started to get off. It started subtly. Little things that I initially brushed off as coincidences or me being overly sensitive. For example, he seemed to know things about me that I hadn't explicitly told him. He'd mention a band I liked that wasn't listed on my Spotify, or an obscure book I'd read years ago that I'd only mentioned in passing to a friend. When I asked him how he knew, he'd just smile and say something vague like, "I'm a good listener," or "I did my research." It was creepy, but I told myself it was just a weird quirk, a sign that he was really paying attention. Then there was the way he looked at me. It wasn't leering or objectifying, but intense. like he was trying to see something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. I'd catch him staring at me across the table, a strange look in his eyes, and when I met his gaze, he'd quickly look away, a sheepish grin on his face. The compliments started to become unsettling too. He'd say things like, "You're exactly how I imagined you," or, "It's like I've known you my whole life." They were sweet, in a way, but also possessive, like he had a preconceived notion of who I was, and I was just fitting into his mold. The turning point came one night after we'd been dating for about a month. We were at my apartment, watching a movie. I'd made popcorn, and we were cuddled up on the couch. It was a normal, cozy night. During a lull in the movie, he turned to me, his eyes unusually intense. "Do you ever feel like you're being watched?" he asked, his voice low. I laughed nervously. "Sometimes. Doesn't everyone?" "No, I mean really watched. Like someone is always there, just out of sight, observing you." I shrugged. "I guess I'm not that interesting. Who would want to watch me?" He reached out and took my hand, his grip surprisingly tight. "I would," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I do." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer, just continued to stare at me, his eyes unblinking. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Finally, I pulled my hand away. "I think I'm going to go to bed," I said, my voice shaking slightly. He didn't try to stop me. He just sat there on the couch, watching me as I gathered my things and retreated to my bedroom. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, wide awake, listening to every creak and groan of the apartment. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next day, I decided to do some digging. I started with his social media. His Facebook and Instagram were pretty bare, just a few generic posts and photos. But then I found his LinkedIn profile. It listed his job as a software developer at a small tech company. I Googled the company, and it seemed legit, but something still felt off. I kept digging. I searched his name online, trying different variations and spellings. And that's when I found it. A news article. A small, local story about a man named Benjamin Carter, who had been arrested years ago for stalking a woman. The charges had eventually been dropped due to lack of evidence, but the details of the case were chilling. He had been obsessed with a woman, following her everywhere, hacking into her email and social media accounts, and even planting hidden cameras in her apartment. The article included a photo of Benjamin Carter. It was an older photo, but it was unmistakably Ben. My blood ran cold. I felt sick to my stomach. I had been dating a stalker. I immediately blocked him on Tinder, deleted his number, and changed all my passwords. I called my best friend and told her everything. She urged me to go to the police, but I hesitated. The charges against him had been dropped before, and I didn't have any concrete evidence that he was stalking me now. But I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and wait for him to escalate. I decided to confront him. I know. It was a stupid idea. I should have gone to the police, gotten a restraining order, done anything but confront him alone. But I was angry, and I wanted answers. I wanted to know why he had lied to me, why he had targeted me. I messaged him on Tinder, using a fake profile. "I know who you are, Benjamin Carter," I wrote. "I know about the stalking." He replied almost instantly. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows the truth. Someone who knows what you did." "I don't know what you're talking about," he wrote back. "Yes, you do. You know about the woman's name from the news article. You know about the cameras. You know about everything." He didn't reply. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he wrote back, "Where are you?" I hesitated, then typed out my address. Again, I know, stupid, but I was past the point of rational thought. He replied, "I'm coming over." I panicked. I should have called the police, but I was too scared, too paralyzed with fear. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and hid in my bedroom, waiting. It wasn't long before I heard the knock on the door. I didn't answer. He knocked again, louder this time. "I know you're in there," he said, his voice muffled through the door. "Open up. We need to talk." I stayed silent, clutching the knife. He started banging on the door, yelling my name. The door rattled in its frame. I thought it was going to break. Then suddenly, the banging stopped. I held my breath, listening. I didn't hear anything. I waited for what felt like hours, but he didn't come back. Finally, I crept out of my bedroom and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I cautiously opened the door and stepped outside. He was gone. I ran to my neighbor's apartment and called the police. They came and took a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. I spent the next few weeks living in a state of constant anxiety. I was afraid to leave my apartment, afraid to answer the phone. I felt like I was being watched all the time. Eventually, I decided to move. I packed up my belongings and moved to a different city, where no one knew me. I changed my name, got a new phone number, and started a new life. I haven't heard from Ben since that night, but I still think about him. I still have nightmares about him, and I still check my locks 3 times before going to bed. It all started with a simple swipe right on Tinder, a seemingly harmless connection that turned into a terrifying ordeal, a reminder that you never really know who you're talking to online, and that sometimes the people who seem the most normal are the ones you should be most afraid of. It has been years. I now do not use any dating apps or social media. I am forever scarred. I still think about him, and I can't find love ever again. Looking back, yeah, I should have seen the warning signs. They were there, glaring at me from the pixelated screen of my phone, hidden in the carefully curated profile of Jake_Adventures. But I was 23, fresh out of a bad breakup and desperate for something. Validation, distraction, a fleeting moment of connection in the swirling chaos of early adulthood. Whatever it was, I was vulnerable, and Jake, with his ruggedly handsome photos and adventurous spirit, seemed like the perfect escape. It started like any other Tinder story. A right swipe, a mutual match, a flurry of messages. He was charming, witty, and surprisingly insightful. He asked about my passions, my dreams, my fears. He listened intently, offering thoughtful responses and sharing his own vulnerabilities. He painted a picture of himself as a free spirit, a traveler, an artist who found inspiration in the world around him. He was exactly the kind of guy I thought I wanted, spontaneous, creative, and unafraid to be himself. His profile was full of pictures from his adventures. Hiking in the mountains, kayaking on a crystal-clear lake, exploring ancient ruins. He seemed to live a life straight out of a travel magazine. One photo in particular stood out. Him standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean, his hair blowing in the wind, a look of pure exhilaration on his face. It was captivating. Looking back, the first red flag was the lack of detail. He was vague about his job, his living situation, his past. When I asked about his work, he'd say he was a freelancer or a consultant, never specifying what he actually did. He lived in a shared house with some friends, but he never mentioned their names or anything about them. And when I tried to delve into his past, he'd deflect with a joke or a change of subject. At the time, I chalked it up to him being private and mysterious. Now, I realize it was more likely a deliberate attempt to conceal something. Another red flag was his intensity. He showered me with compliments, telling me how beautiful, intelligent, and unique I was. He'd text me constantly, wanting to know what I was doing, how I was feeling. He'd tell me he couldn't stop thinking about me, that he'd never met anyone like me before. It was flattering, intoxicating even, but it was also overwhelming, like he was trying to fast forward our relationship before it had even begun. Despite these warning signs, I was hooked. I was drawn to his charisma, his energy, his apparent interest in me. I ignored the nagging doubts in the back of my mind and convinced myself that he was just a little quirky, a little different. We talked on Tinder for a couple of weeks before he asked me out. He suggested a hike in the mountains, followed by a picnic lunch. It seemed like the perfect date, straight out of his profile. I eagerly agreed. The day of the date, he picked me up in an old, beat-up Jeep. It was exactly the kind of car I'd expect him to drive, rugged, adventurous, and a little bit unreliable. He greeted me with a warm hug and a dazzling smile. For a moment, all my doubts vanished. The hike was beautiful. We walked along a winding trail through a lush forest, the air filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. He told stories about his travels, his art, his philosophies on life. He was captivating, and I found myself completely lost in his world. But as the hike progressed, I started to notice more red flags. He seemed overly concerned with my safety, constantly reminding me to be careful, to watch my step. He kept a close eye on me, never letting me stray too far from his side. It was like he was afraid of something, or maybe afraid of me getting away. When we reached the summit, the view was breathtaking. We spread out a blanket and ate our picnic lunch. He brought sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of wine. As we ate, he started asking more personal questions, probing deeper into my past, my insecurities, my fears. He seemed to be trying to understand me, to dissect me. After lunch, he suggested we explore a nearby cave. I hesitated. I'm not a big fan of caves. They're dark, claustrophobic, and full of creepy crawlies. But he insisted, telling me it was a hidden gem, a place of incredible beauty. He promised to protect me, to keep me safe. I reluctantly agreed. We entered the cave, the darkness closing in around us. He turned on a flashlight, illuminating the narrow passage ahead. The air was cold and damp, and the silence was deafening. As we ventured deeper into the cave, I started to feel increasingly uncomfortable. The passage grew narrower, the air thinner. I felt like we were being watched, like something was lurking in the shadows. I told him I wanted to turn back, but he refused. He said we were almost there, that the best part was just ahead. He urged me on, pulling me along by the hand. Finally, we reached a large cavern. The flashlight revealed a stunning display of stalactites and stalagmites, shimmering in the dim light. It was beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He led me to the center of the cavern, where a small pool of water had formed. He told me to look into the water, to see my reflection. I peered into the water, but all I saw was darkness. He told me to look deeper, to see my true self. As I stared into the water, I started to feel dizzy, disoriented. The cavern seemed to be spinning around me. I felt like I was losing control. Suddenly, he grabbed me by the shoulders and pulled me close. He stared into my eyes, his gaze intense and unsettling. He whispered something in my ear, something I couldn't quite understand. Then he kissed me. It was a strange, unsettling kiss. His lips were cold and clammy, his touch forceful and possessive. I felt like I was being consumed, devoured. I pulled away, gasping for air. I told him I wanted to leave, to go home. He smiled, a chilling, predatory smile. He said we weren't going anywhere. That's when I knew I was in danger. I tried to run, but he grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. He pulled me back towards him, his eyes burning with an intensity one had never seen before. He started speaking in a low, guttural voice, a language I didn't understand. He was like a different person, a monster. I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the darkness of the cave. He started dragging me deeper into the cavern, towards a hidden passage I hadn't noticed before. I fought him with all my strength, kicking, screaming, scratching. But he was too strong. He dragged me into the passage, the darkness closing in around us. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was about to die. Then, something unexpected happened. My phone rang. The sound echoed through the cavern, cutting through the darkness and the silence. It startled him, momentarily breaking his hold on me. I seized the opportunity and kicked him in the shin. He yelped in pain, releasing his grip. I scrambled away from him, grabbing my phone from my pocket. I answered the call, my voice trembling. It was my best friend, Sarah. She was calling to check on me, to see how the date was going. I managed to stammer out a few words, telling her I was in trouble, that I needed help. She heard the panic in my voice and immediately knew something was wrong. She asked for my location, and I told her I was in a cave in the mountains. She promised to call the police and send them to my rescue. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to buy myself some time, to keep him distracted until help arrived. I started talking to him, trying to reason with him, to understand what he wanted. I asked him why he was doing this, what he hoped to achieve. He stared at me blankly, his eyes devoid of emotion. He said he was doing what he had to do, that it was my destiny. He started speaking again in that strange language, chanting some kind of ritual. He seemed to be in a trance, completely detached from reality. I knew I couldn't reach him, that he was beyond reason. All I could do was wait for help to arrive. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I could hear the sirens in the distance, growing louder and louder. Finally, the police arrived. They stormed into the cavern, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. He didn't resist. He seemed almost relieved, as if he had been waiting for this moment. They arrested him and led him away, his face expressionless. I was safe. The police took me to the hospital, where I was examined and treated for my injuries. I was shaken, traumatized, but alive. The investigation revealed a disturbing truth about Jake. He was a serial abductor and murderer who had been luring women into the woods and killing them for years. His Tinder profile was a carefully crafted facade, designed to attract vulnerable women like me. He had been using the cave as a burial ground, disposing of his victims' bodies in the hidden passage I had nearly been dragged into. I was his latest target, his next victim. I was lucky to escape with my life. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs, but I was blinded by my own desires, my own vulnerabilities. I ignored my instincts and trusted someone I shouldn't have. I will never make that mistake again. I still have nightmares about that day in the cave, about the darkness, the fear, the chilling smile on his face. I will never forget the terror I felt, the certainty that I was about to die. But I will also never forget the strength I found within myself, the courage to fight back, the determination to survive. I am a survivor, and I will never let anyone take that away from me. I'd been swiping on Tinder for a few months, just after my messy breakup. Honestly, it was more about the ego boost than actually finding anyone. The validation of a match, a witty opening line, a fleeting conversation, it was all a welcome distraction from the constant loop of self-doubt playing in my head. I wasn't looking for love, just a temporary reprieve from the loneliness that had become my unwelcome roommate. My profile was pretty standard, a few decentish photos, a bio that vaguely hinted at my interests, hiking, books, pretending to be a functioning adult, and a disclaimer about being emotionally unavailable. I thought I was being upfront, setting expectations low. Apparently, my honesty was a magnet for a certain type of guy, the kind who saw emotionally unavailable as a challenge. Enter Mark. His profile was intriguing. He had this intense gaze in his photos, like he was staring right through the camera and into your soul. His bio was short and cryptic. I see things others don't. Creepy, right? But my curiosity got the better of me. Plus, he was undeniably attractive. So I swiped right. We matched almost instantly, and he messaged me right away. His opening line wasn't some tired pickup attempt. It was a genuine question about a book I'd mentioned in my profile. I was impressed. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He was intelligent, articulate, and had a surprisingly dark sense of humor that aligned perfectly with my own. We bonded over our mutual love of horror movies and our shared cynicism about the world. After a week of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up. I hesitated. There was something about him that made me uneasy, a subtle undercurrent of intensity that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But I also didn't want to be a coward. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was projecting my past relationship baggage onto him. So I agreed. We decided to meet at a local coffee shop. It was a busy place, lots of people around, so I figured it was a safe bet. I arrived a few minutes early and scanned the crowd, trying to spot him. And then I saw him. He looked even better in person. Tall, with piercing blue eyes and a smile that could melt glaciers. He walked towards me, and I felt a flutter of nervous excitement in my stomach. "Sarah," he asked, his voice deep and smooth. I nodded, and he leaned in to give me a hug. The first hour of the date was amazing. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing and joking like we'd known each other for years. He was charming, witty, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. I started to relax, to let my guard down. Maybe I had misjudged him. Maybe he wasn't so creepy after all. But then, the conversation took a turn. He started asking me about my dreams. Not the career-oriented kind, but the actual dreams I had when I was sleeping. He wanted to know about the recurring nightmares I'd had as a child, the strange, nonsensical visions that haunted my subconscious. I was hesitant to share. These were deeply personal things that I rarely spoke about. But he was so insistent, so genuinely curious, that I eventually gave in. I told him about the shadowy figure that always lurked in the corner of my childhood bedroom, the endless staircase that I could never reach the top of, the feeling of being chased by something unseen. As I spoke, his eyes grew wider, more intense. He leaned closer, his gaze fixed on me. It felt like he was trying to burrow into my mind. "I knew it," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "Knew what?" I asked, a knot of unease forming in my stomach. "That you were one of us," he replied, a strange smile spreading across his face. "One of us? What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He reached across the table and took my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. We're the dreamers, Sarah. The ones who see beyond the veil. The ones who know that reality is not what it seems. I tried to pull my hand away, but he wouldn't let go. Mark, you're scaring me, I said, my voice rising in panic. Don't be afraid, he said, his eyes shining with an almost manic intensity. I can show you things you've never imagined. I can unlock the secrets of your mind. I don't want to see anything, I said, my voice cracking. I just want to go home. He finally released my hand, but his gaze remained fixed on me. You can't go home, Sarah, he said softly. You're already here. I stood up abruptly, knocking over my chair in the process. People stared, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get away from him. Mark, this is insane, I said, my voice shaking. I'm leaving. He didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, watching me with that unsettling smile on his face. You can run, Sarah, he said, his voice low and menacing, but you can't hide from your dreams. I turned and fled, pushing my way through the crowded coffee shop and out into the street. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, my heart pounding in my chest. I fumbled with the keys, desperately trying to unlock the door. As I finally managed to get inside and lock the doors, I looked back at the coffee shop. Mark was standing outside watching me. He raised his hand and gave me a slow, deliberate wave. It was in that moment, as I looked at his face through the car window, that I truly felt unsafe. Up until then, I just thought he was a little odd, perhaps too intense. But seeing him standing there, with that knowing smile on his face, I realized that he was something else entirely. He wasn't just a creepy Tinder date. He was something more, something dangerous. I drove home as fast as I could, my eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror. I was convinced he was following me, that he was lurking just around the corner. When I finally reached my apartment, I raced inside, locking all the doors and windows. I collapsed onto my couch, gasping for breath. I felt like I had just escaped from a nightmare. But the nightmare wasn't over. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find my bedroom door open, even though I was sure I had locked it. I would hear whispers in the dark, voices that seemed to be calling my name. I would see shadows moving in the periphery of my vision, fleeting glimpses of something unnatural. I tried to rationalize it all, to tell myself that it was just my imagination, that I was letting my anxiety get the better of me. But deep down, I knew that something was wrong. Mark had somehow gotten into my head, and he was starting to unravel my reality. One night, I woke up to find him standing at the foot of my bed. He was silhouetted against the moonlight, his face obscured by shadows. I screamed, but no sound came out. I tried to move, but my body was paralyzed with fear. Don't be afraid, Sarah, he said, his voice soft and soothing. I'm here to help you. Help me? You're terrorizing me. I managed to croak out, my voice barely audible. He chuckled softly. Terrorizing you? No, Sarah. I'm freeing you. I'm showing you the truth. He took a step closer, and I could see his face more clearly. His eyes were glowing with an eerie light, and his smile was wider, more sinister than ever before. The truth is, Sarah, he said, that you've been asleep your whole life, but now you're finally waking up. He reached out his hand, and I flinched, expecting him to touch me. But instead, he pointed to the wall behind me. I turned my head, and that's when I saw it. On the wall, scrawled in what looked like blood, were the words, "Welcome to the dream." The room started to spin, and I felt myself falling into a dark, bottomless abyss. As I fell, I heard Mark's voice echoing in my head. You can't escape, Sarah. This is your reality now. I woke up the next morning in my bed, the sunlight streaming through the window. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. Was it all a dream? Had I imagined the whole thing? I looked at the wall, and there it was. The message, "Welcome to the dream." That's when I knew. I was trapped. Mark had somehow found a way to enter my dreams, to manipulate my reality, and I was completely at his mercy. I don't know what he wants from me. I don't know how to escape. All I know is that I'm living in a nightmare, and I don't know if I'll ever wake up. I deactivated my Tinder. I still can't believe it actually happened. I mean, I read about these things, hear the horror stories whispered in hushed tones among my friends, the cautionary tales of online dating gone wrong. But I never thought it would happen to me. I thought I was too smart, Too discerning, too cynical maybe, to fall for whatever trap was out there. I guess that's what they all say, right? It started, like most of these things do, with a swipe. I was bored, restless, nursing a glass of cheap wine on a Friday night, scrolling mindlessly through Tinder. I'd been single for a while, content enough with my own company, but occasionally feeling that familiar tug of loneliness. Sarah, that was her name on the app. Her profile was simple, understated. A few candid photos of her hiking, one with a dog, another at a local coffee shop. She looked normal, refreshingly so, compared to the filtered, posed perfection that dominated the app. Her bio was even more appealing. Looking for someone to explore the city with. Bonus points if you know a good dive bar. I swiped right without hesitation. We matched almost instantly. The conversation flowed easily. She was witty, intelligent, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything and nothing. Our favorite movies, our dream travel destinations, the most embarrassing moments of our lives. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up. We chose a small, relatively unknown bar in a neighborhood I hadn't explored before. It seemed like the perfect low-pressure first date spot. The bar was dimly lit, cozy, with mismatched furniture and a jukebox playing old blues tunes. Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nursing a beer. She looked even better in person. Her eyes were bright and intelligent, her smile genuine and warm. We talked for hours that night, laughing and sharing stories. There was an undeniable connection, a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We went on dates almost every night, exploring hidden parks, trying new restaurants, attending concerts at tiny venues. Sarah was adventurous, spontaneous, and always up for anything. I found myself falling for her hard and fast. She seemed too good to be true, and maybe that should have been my first red flag. But I was blinded by the excitement of a new relationship, by the hope that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found someone special. I ignored the niggling doubts, the little inconsistencies that didn't quite add up, like the fact that she never talked about her family or her friends, or that she always seemed to avoid taking photos together, or that she was strangely vague about her job. Looking back, the signs were all there, clear as day. But I was too caught up in the fantasy to see them. The first real crack in the facade appeared a few months into the relationship. We were at my apartment, watching a movie, when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from a friend, asking if I was still seeing that Sarah girl. I shrugged it off, assuming it was just a casual inquiry. But when I looked at my phone again later, I saw that my friend had sent a follow-up message. Dude, I think she's using you. I dismissed it as jealousy or paranoia. My friend had always been overly protective, suspicious of anyone I dated. But the message planted a seed of doubt in my mind, a seed that quickly began to sprout. I decided to do some digging. I started with the basics, a Google search. I typed in her name, expecting to find some trace of her online presence. A Facebook profile, a LinkedIn account, anything. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was as if she didn't exist. I told myself it was just a coincidence, that she was simply private and didn't use social media. But the unease continued to grow. I started paying closer attention to her stories, her anecdotes, searching for inconsistencies. And I found them. Little things, subtle contradictions that didn't make sense. Dates that didn't line up, places she claimed to have visited that didn't exist. I confronted her about it one night. We were at her apartment, a small, sparsely furnished studio in a rundown building. I tried to be gentle, to approach the conversation with curiosity rather than accusation. But as soon as I started asking questions, her demeanor changed. She became defensive, evasive, her eyes darting around the room. She claimed that I was being paranoid, that I didn't trust her, that I was ruining everything. She started to cry, accusing me of trying to control her. I felt guilty, ashamed of my suspicions. I apologized, promising to drop the subject. But the damage was done. The trust was broken. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something, that I didn't really know her at all. Over the next few weeks, I became increasingly distant, withdrawn. I couldn't bring myself to fully invest in the relationship, knowing that it was built on a foundation of lies. Sarah noticed the change, of course. She tried to win me back, showering me with attention, making grand gestures of affection. But it was too late. The magic was gone. One night, I decided to end it. We were at a restaurant, celebrating my birthday. I had planned to tell her earlier in the evening, but I kept putting it off, hoping that somehow, magically, things would go back to the way they were. But as I looked at her across the table, I knew that it was impossible. The person I had fallen in love with was an illusion, a figment of my imagination. I told her that I couldn't do it anymore, that I needed to be honest with myself and with her. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me, her eyes cold and empty. Then, a slow smile spread across her face. "I knew this was coming," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You were getting too close." I didn't understand what she meant. Too close to what? I asked. She leaned across the table, her eyes locking with mine. "To the truth," she whispered. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, silver object. I couldn't quite make out what it was in the dim light. Before I could react, she lunged at me, the object glinting in her hand. I instinctively recoiled, knocking over my chair and scrambling away from the table. She followed me, her movements surprisingly quick and agile. I realized then that the object was a knife. I ran, screaming for help, but the restaurant was nearly empty. It was late, and most of the staff had already gone home. I could hear Sarah behind me, her footsteps echoing in the deserted dining room. I managed to make it to the front door and burst out onto the street. I didn't stop running until I reached a busy intersection, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I called the police, told them everything that had happened. They arrived within minutes, sirens blaring, lights flashing. They searched the restaurant, but Sarah was gone, vanished without a trace. They took me to the police station, where I spent hours answering questions, reliving the terrifying events of the night. They ran her name through their databases, but found nothing. No records, no fingerprints, no identification. It was as if she had never existed. The police launched an investigation, but they quickly hit a dead end. They couldn't find any witnesses, any evidence, any leads. The case went cold. I was left traumatized, haunted by the memory of that night. I moved to a new city, changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts. I tried to start over, to rebuild my life, but the fear never really went away. I still can't believe it actually happened. I still wonder who Sarah really was, what her motives were, what she was hiding. Was she a con artist, a sociopath, a figment of my imagination? I may never know the answer. All I know is that I'll never trust a Tinder profile again, and that sometimes the person you think you know best is the one who's capable of the greatest betrayal. The world can be full of sick people, and dating apps are not a good place to find love. Be careful who you meet online. Now, I am cautious of meeting people online. I think of what happened to me. I don't think it will ever happen again. It's funny, isn't it? How sometimes the mundane can turn into the macabre. How a simple swipe, a fleeting judgment based on a filtered picture and a witty bio, can open a door to something you never imagined. I used Tinder on and off for years, mostly out of boredom. I'd get a few matches, chat for a bit, maybe meet up for a drink. Usually, it was harmless, forgettable. But one particular match changed everything. I was in a weird place in my life, freshly divorced, adrift, trying to figure out who I was outside of being someone's wife. Tinder seemed like a good way to dip my toes back into the dating pool without actually committing to anything. I wasn't looking for love, just connection, maybe a distraction. That's when I saw his profile. Liam. Dark hair, intense blue eyes, a brooding smile. He looked artistic. His bio was short and intriguing. Looking for someone to explore the city with. Let's get lost. I swiped right without thinking, and to my surprise, we matched almost instantly. Our conversation started out normal enough. We talked about our jobs, our hobbies, our favorite movies. He was a writer, or at least he said he was. He was vague about the details, which I found appealing at the time. It felt like he was holding something back, and I was curious to find out what it was. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a small, independent bookstore in the city center, followed by coffee at a nearby cafe. It sounded harmless, even charming. I agreed, a little nervous, but mostly excited. He was even more attractive in person. Tall, with a quiet intensity that drew me in. We spent hours browsing the shelves, talking about books and life. He had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room, like he was genuinely interested in everything I had to say. The coffee date stretched into dinner, and then drinks at a dimly lit bar. We talked for hours, and I felt a connection with him, that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. He was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly vulnerable. He told me about his struggles with writing, his fears about the future. I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't even opened up to my ex-husband. We ended the night with a kiss, a lingering, passionate kiss that left me breathless. I went home feeling like I had finally found something real, something special. We started seeing each other regularly after that. We explored the city together, just like he had suggested in his bio. We went to museums, art galleries, hidden cafes. He showed me parts of the city I had never seen before, secret places that felt like they were just for us. He was always full of surprises. He'd leave me handwritten notes in my mailbox, send me poems in the middle of the night, show up at my work with flowers for no reason. He was incredibly romantic, almost too romantic. But there were also red flags, subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. He was intensely private, almost secretive. He never talked about his family or his past. He always deflected when I asked him about his writing career. He was also possessive, almost controlling. He didn't like it when I went out with my friends, and he always wanted to know where I was and who I was with. I tried to ignore the red flags, to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. I wanted to believe that he was the perfect man I had been searching for. Then one night I made a mistake. I went to his apartment for the first time. It was small and sparsely furnished, almost sterile. There were no personal touches, no pictures on the walls, no books on the shelves. It felt like a temporary space, like he wasn't really living there. He offered me a glass of wine, and we sat on the couch, talking and laughing. But as the night wore on, he started acting strange. He became more intense, more possessive. He started asking me questions about my past, about my divorce, about my ex-husband. He kept pressing, demanding to know every detail. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't want to upset him. I answered his questions as honestly as I could, trying to reassure him that my past was behind me. But it wasn't enough. He became increasingly agitated, his eyes dark and wild. He started pacing the room, muttering to himself. Then, he stopped pacing and turned to me, his face contorted with anger. "You're lying to me," he said, his voice low and menacing. "I can see it in your eyes." I was terrified. I tried to reassure him, to tell him that I was telling the truth. But he wouldn't listen. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. "Tell me the truth," he shouted, his voice echoing in the small apartment. "Tell me what you're hiding." I was crying now, begging him to let me go. But he wouldn't release me. He dragged me into the bedroom, threw me onto the bed, and pinned me down. I struggled, kicking and screaming, but he was too strong. He held me down, his eyes burning with rage. "I know you're lying to me," he said, his voice a low growl. "I can feel it. You think you can hide from me, but you can't. I know everything about you." He started to choke me, his hands tightening around my neck. I couldn't breathe, my vision blurring. I thought I was going to die. Then, suddenly, he stopped. He released me, his eyes wide with horror. He stumbled back, his hands shaking. I didn't mean to," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what came over me." I scrambled off the bed and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove home in a daze, my body shaking, my mind reeling. I didn't call the police. I was too scared, too ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know what had happened. I blocked Liam's number and deleted him from all my social media accounts. I tried to forget about him, to pretend that it never happened, but I couldn't. The memory of that night haunted me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't function. I was living in a constant state of fear. A few weeks later, I started getting messages from an unknown number. They were strange, cryptic messages, filled with threats and accusations. "I know what you did." One message said, "I'm watching you. You can't hide from me." Another message said, "I'll find you." I was terrified. I knew it was Liam. He was stalking me, tormenting me. I finally went to the police. I told them everything that had happened, from the first date to the choking incident. They took my statement and promised to investigate, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. They couldn't track Liam down without a warrant, and they couldn't get a warrant without proof that he was actually threatening me. I felt helpless, trapped. I knew Liam was out there, watching me, waiting for his chance. Then, one day, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before opening it, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside the box was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, taken through my bedroom window. I was sleeping in my bed. On the back of the photograph was a message, scrawled in blood-red ink. "I told you I was watching you." I screamed and dropped the box, my body shaking uncontrollably. I knew I was in danger, real danger. I called the police again, frantic. I told them about the package, about the photograph. They finally took me seriously. They launched a full-scale investigation, tracking Liam's phone, searching his apartment. But he was gone. He had disappeared without a trace. They never found him. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and started a new life. But I still live in fear, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if he's out there watching me. I'll never use Tinder again. I'll never trust anyone I meet online. I learned a hard lesson, a lesson that cost me my peace of mind, my sense of security. The scariest part? This really happened. Every word of it. And it all started with a simple swipe right. A swipe that changed my life forever. Now, I try to warn others, though many do not listen. It's a gamble, one I will never take again. I didn't realize the danger I was in until I saw the missing person flyer taped to the community bulletin board at the local coffee shop. It was a grainy photo of a girl with bright, hopeful eyes and a cascade of fiery red hair. The caption screamed, "Have you seen Lily? Last seen 2 weeks ago." My stomach dropped as I recognized the name. Lily. We matched on Tinder a few months back. It started like any other Tinder interaction. The endless swiping, the fleeting moments of attraction, the algorithm dictating potential connections. I was fresh out of a messy breakup, looking for a distraction, something to fill the void of loneliness that had settled deep within me. Tinder seemed like the perfect solution, a buffet of potential partners, a quick fix for a wounded ego. Lily's profile stood out from the sea of selfies and cliché bios. Her photos were candid and genuine, showcasing a love for hiking and a quirky sense of humor. Her bio was short and sweet, looking for someone to explore hidden gems with. Intrigued, I swiped right. We matched almost instantly. Our conversations were easy and engaging, a refreshing departure from the superficial exchanges I was used to on the app. We talked about everything and nothing, from our favorite books and movies to our deepest fears and aspirations. She was intelligent, witty, and had this infectious zest for life that drew me in. We quickly moved our conversations off Tinder, exchanging numbers and texting late into the night. After a week of intense texting, we decided to meet in person. She suggested a local art gallery, a place I had never been to before. I was excited and nervous, hoping that the chemistry we had online would translate into real life. She was even more captivating in person. Her red hair was even brighter, her eyes even more expressive. We spent hours wandering through the gallery, discussing the art and sharing personal anecdotes. I felt an instant connection, a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. We went on a few more dates after that, exploring different parts of the city, trying new restaurants, and laughing until our stomachs hurt. I was falling for her hard. She seemed perfect, too good to be true. Maybe that should have been my first clue. But there were subtle inconsistencies, little quirks that I initially dismissed as endearing. She was vague about her job, always deflecting when I asked about her day-to-day life. She preferred to meet in public places, avoiding my apartment and never inviting me to hers. She had a habit of checking her phone constantly, her fingers hovering over the screen as if she was expecting an urgent message. And there was this underlying sadness in her eyes, a shadow that would occasionally flicker across her face, hinting at a deeper pain. I tried to brush these things aside, attributing them to her personality or past experiences. I was so caught up in the whirlwind of our romance that I didn't want to see the red flags. I wanted to believe that she was the one, the person who would finally make me happy. Then, one day, she stopped responding to my texts. I called her, but the phone went straight to voicemail. I assumed she was busy or had lost her phone, but as the days turned into weeks, my anxiety grew. I tried reaching out on social media, but her accounts were deactivated. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. I started to panic. I told myself that she was probably just going through something personal and needed space, but a nagging voice in the back of my mind told me that something was terribly wrong. I filed a missing person report with the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more information. I was devastated, consumed by guilt and fear. Had I done something to scare her away? Was she in danger? I replayed our conversations in my head, searching for clues, trying to make sense of her disappearance. And then I saw the flyer. Lily, the girl I had fallen for, the girl who had vanished, now a missing person. The flyer sent a jolt of cold fear through my veins. I stared at her photo, my mind racing, trying to piece together the puzzle. The inconsistencies, the secrecy, the sudden disappearance. It all started to make sense, but not in a good way. Driven by a desperate need to know the truth, I started digging. I scoured the internet for any information about Lily, poring over news articles, social media posts, and online forums. I discovered that her real name was not Lily, but Sarah, and she had a history of dating men she met online, only to disappear shortly after. I found forum posts from other men who had similar experiences with her, sharing stories of fleeting romances and sudden disappearances. Some speculated that she was a con artist, others that she was a victim of abuse. The theories were endless, but one thing was clear. Something was very wrong. The more I learned, the more terrified I became. I realized that I didn't know anything about this woman, the person I had trusted and opened my heart to. I had been so blinded by my own desires that I had ignored the warning signs. I contacted the police again, armed with my newfound information. This time, they took me seriously. They launched a full-scale investigation, interviewing the other men who had been involved with Sarah and tracing her online activity. Weeks turned into months, and the investigation dragged on. I lived in a constant state of anxiety, wondering if Sarah was safe, if she was alive. I felt responsible, like I should have seen the danger sooner. Finally, after months of searching, the police made a breakthrough. They tracked Sarah to a remote cabin in the woods, where they found her living under an assumed identity. She was not a victim, as I had feared, but a perpetrator. She had been manipulating men online, exploiting their emotions for her own twisted game. It turned out that Sarah was suffering from a severe personality disorder, a condition that drove her to seek validation and control through deception. She would create elaborate personas online, lure men into relationships, and then abruptly disappear, leaving them heartbroken and confused. The police also discovered evidence linking Sarah to other missing person cases, women who had vanished after meeting her online. It was a chilling revelation, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk in the digital world. Sarah was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and abduction. Her trial was a media sensation, a cautionary tale about the dark side of online dating. As for me, I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered reality. I had been emotionally manipulated and almost become a victim of a dangerous predator. The experience left me scarred, wary of online relationships, and struggling to trust people again. I learned a valuable lesson, one that I will never forget. The internet can be a dangerous place, and not everyone is who they seem to be. It's important to be cautious, to trust your instincts, and to never ignore the red flags. I didn't realize the danger I was in until it was almost too late, and I am lucky to be alive to tell the tale. While the trauma still lingers, I have used the experience to educate others, cautioning them about the risks of online dating and encouraging them to prioritize their safety and well-being. Perhaps, by sharing my story, I can prevent someone else from falling victim to the same twisted game. The internet is a powerful tool, but it is also a breeding ground for deception and manipulation. Remember to always proceed with caution, to trust your gut, and to never underestimate the darkness that can hide behind a pretty profile picture. To this day, I still get chills thinking about the summer I decided to give Tinder a serious shot. Not the casual, swipe when I'm bored kind of thing, but a real, concerted effort to meet someone. I was fresh out of a messy breakup, feeling lonely and honestly a little lost. My friends kept telling me to put myself out there, and Tinder seemed like the easiest way to do that, without having to actually, do anything particularly brave. I updated my profile, put up some decent photos, filtered of course, and crafted a bio that was both witty and vaguely mysterious. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just someone to hang out with, maybe go on a few dates, and hopefully, distract myself from the gaping hole my ex had left behind. It started like it always does, a flurry of matches, a bunch of awkward small talk, and a few underwhelming dates that went nowhere. I was starting to get discouraged, convinced that Tinder was just a vortex of superficiality and disappointment when I matched with him. His name was Alex, and his profile was different. It wasn't the usual collection of gym selfies and group shots. Instead, he had pictures of landscapes, art museums, and a couple of him playing guitar in what looked like a dimly lit basement. His bio was equally intriguing. Interested in art, music, and exploring the hidden corners of the city. No mention of hookups, no cheesy pickup lines, just a genuine-sounding invitation to connect. We started talking, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced on Tinder before. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, books, movies, our dreams, our fears. It felt easy, natural, like we'd known each other for years. After a week of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a small, independent coffee shop in a part of town I'd never been to before. It was tucked away on a quiet side street with mismatched furniture and a cozy, intimate atmosphere. When I saw him, I was instantly struck by how different he looked in person. His pictures hadn't really captured his intensity. He had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through you, and a way of carrying himself that was both confident and slightly unsettling. The date itself was strange. The conversation flowed easily, just like it had online, but there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. He asked a lot of questions about my past, my family, my deepest insecurities. It wasn't aggressive or intrusive, but it felt probing, like he was trying to dig deeper than anyone ever had before. As the night wore on, he started talking about his own experiences, but his stories were disjointed and confusing. He spoke about traveling the world, living off the grid, and having encounters with people who seemed almost otherworldly. I tried to brush it off as eccentricity, but a seed of unease had been planted in my mind. After the coffee shop, he suggested we go for a walk in a nearby park. It was late, and the park was deserted. The only light came from the moon filtering through the trees, casting long, eerie shadows. As we walked, he started talking about the park's history, telling stories of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances. He spoke in a low, hushed voice, creating an atmosphere of suspense and dread. At one point, he stopped walking and turned to face me. His eyes were gleaming in the moonlight. He said, "You know, this park is said to be a gateway to another world, a place where the veil between realities is thin." I laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, Alex, you're scaring me." He didn't laugh. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. "I'm not joking," he said. "There are things out there that you can't even imagine, things that are beyond our comprehension." I was starting to feel genuinely uncomfortable. I told him I had to go home, that I was tired. He didn't try to stop me. He just watched me walk away, a strange, knowing smile on his face. The next day, I tried to brush off the date as just a weird encounter with an eccentric guy, but something about it lingered in my mind, a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. I decided to do some research on Alex. I started with a simple Google search, but nothing came up. No social media profiles, no mentions in any articles or news stories. It was like he didn't exist. I found this to be weird, so I began using all the other ways I find people online, such as reverse searches and background checkers, but it never showed anything. I became worried. I asked around with some of my friends if they knew him, and a few said they remember seeing a guy that looked like him, but they said they never met him. One day a friend said she matched with him on Tinder and went on a date, and he was just like how I described. This made me even more worried and confused. As the days went by, the unsettling feeling grew stronger. I started noticing things in my apartment that were out of place. A book that had been moved from the shelf. A door that I was sure I had locked. It was subtle, but it was enough to make me feel like I was being watched. I went to the police, but since there was nothing for me to report other than I had a weird date, they could not do anything and sent me home. Then one night, I woke up to find him standing in my bedroom. He was just standing there, in the darkness, staring at me. I screamed, and he didn't move. He just stood there, his eyes glowing in the darkness. "I told you there were things out there that you couldn't imagine," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the door, but he was faster. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I'm here to show you the truth." I struggled against him, but he was too strong. He dragged me out of the apartment and down the stairs. I tried to scream for help, but no one heard me. He led me to his car, a beat-up old sedan that looked like it had seen better days. He forced me into the passenger seat and sped off into the night. I didn't know where he was taking me. I was terrified, convinced that I was going to die. After what felt like hours, we arrived at a remote location outside of the city. It was a deserted field, surrounded by woods. The only light came from the moon, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape. He led me to the center of the field, where there was a strange, circular formation of stones. It looked like some kind of ancient ritual site. "This is it," he said. "This is where the veil is the thinnest." He started chanting in a language I didn't understand. His voice grew louder and louder, until it filled the entire field. The air crackled with energy. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The sky turned a strange, swirling color. A portal opened in the center of the stone circle, revealing a glimpse of another world. I was horrified. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like something out of a nightmare. He turned to me, his eyes filled with an almost manic glee. "Come with me," he said. "Let me show you the truth." I don't know what happened next. My memory is hazy, fragmented. I remember flashes of light, strange sounds, and a feeling of utter terror. I woke up the next morning in my own bed. I was alone. The police arrived at my home the next day because I was reported missing the prior night. The only clue that I was missing was my open door. At first, I thought it had all been a dream. But as the day went on, I started to remember things. The coffee shop, the park, the strange stories, the ritual site. I tried to tell the police what had happened, but they didn't believe me. They said I was probably just suffering from some kind of delusion. I started to doubt myself. Maybe it had all been a dream. Maybe I was just losing my mind. But then, I found something that convinced me it was real. Under my pillow, there was a small, intricately carved stone. It was the same kind of stone that had been used to build the ritual site. I knew then that it wasn't a dream. It was real. And whatever had happened that night, it had changed me forever. To this day, I still get chills thinking about Alex and that summer. I try to forget it, to move on with my life. But I can't shake the feeling that something is still out there, watching me. I never went back on Tinder. I stopped dating altogether. I became a recluse, afraid of the world and the things that lurk beneath the surface. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that I can hear his voice, whispering in the darkness. I told you there were things out there that you couldn't imagine. And I know, with a chilling certainty, that he's right. There are things out there that we can't imagine. And sometimes, they find us on Tinder. Okay, so this happened to me a few months ago, and honestly, I still get chills thinking about it. I am usually pretty good at reading people, picking up on red flags. But this guy completely blindsided me. I'd been on Tinder for a while, just casually swiping, not really looking for anything serious. You know, the usual, a few awkward dates, some decent conversations that fizzled out, and the occasional truly bizarre encounter. Nothing that really stuck with me, though. Until Liam. His profile was different. Not in a flashy, try-hard way, but in a subtly intriguing one. He had a few photos. One of him hiking in what looked like the Pacific Northwest, another of him reading in a dimly lit coffee shop, and a close-up that showed his eyes, which were this really intense, almost unsettling shade of green. His bio was short and sweet, looking for good conversation and maybe some adventure. Let's see where it goes. I swiped right, and we matched almost instantly. He messaged me right away, and we started chatting. And I am not kidding, the conversation was amazing. He was smart, funny, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me, not just what I looked like or what I was doing that night. We talked about books, movies, travel, our families, our dreams, everything. It was like we had known each other forever. After a few days of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I was a little hesitant, You never really know who you read talking to online, but I was also really drawn to him. There was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on, a sort of magnetic pull. So I said yes. We met at a cafe near my apartment. He was even more attractive in person. Tall, with a lean build, that intense green eyes, and a kind of quiet confidence that I found incredibly attractive. We talked for hours. The conversation flowed effortlessly, just like it had online. It felt easy. Too easy, maybe. But I ignored that little voice in the back of my head. We started seeing each other regularly. We went to movies, concerts, art galleries. We cooked dinner at each other's apartments. He was always so attentive, so thoughtful, so perfect. He remembered the little details, my favorite flower, the name of my childhood pet, the specific type of tea I liked. He seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. My friends were a little skeptical. They said he seemed too good to be true. They warned me about love bombing and manipulation, but I brushed it off. I told them they were just jealous. I was falling hard for Liam, and I didn't want anyone to ruin it for me. Then things started to get weird. It started with small things. He would show up at my apartment unannounced, saying he was just in the neighborhood and wanted to surprise me. At first, it was sweet, but then it started to feel intrusive. He would ask me about my schedule, my friends, my family, in excruciating detail. He wanted to know everything about my life. He also started getting jealous. He didn't like it when I went out with my friends, even if he was busy. He would call and text constantly, wanting to know where I was and who I was with. He started accusing me of flirting with other guys. I tried to reassure him that he was the only one for me, but it didn't seem to matter. One night, I was at a party with my friends, and Liam showed up without telling me. He said he couldn't stand being away from me and wanted to surprise me, but he was acting off. He was quiet and withdrawn, and he kept glaring at the other guys at the party. He pulled me aside and started whispering in my ear, telling me how much he loved me and how he couldn't live without me. It was intense and overwhelming. I tried to get him to relax and enjoy himself, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept clinging to me, his grip tightening with each passing minute. Finally, I told him I needed some air and went outside. He followed me. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice tight. "I just need some space," I said. "You're being a little intense." He stared at me, his eyes narrowed. "Intense," he said. "I am just showing you how much I care about you." "I know, but it's too much," I said. "I need you to back off a little." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then his expression changed. His eyes went cold and his jaw clenched. "You don't appreciate me, do you?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't realize how lucky you are to have me." I took a step back, suddenly afraid. "Liam, you re-scaring me," I said. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Scared," he said. "You should be." He lunged at me, grabbing my arm. His grip was so tight that it hurt. "You mine," he hissed. "You belong to me." I struggled to break free, but he was too strong. He dragged me toward his car, his grip tightening with each step. I started screaming. Luckily, someone heard me. A couple of guys from the party came running outside and pulled Liam off of me. He didn't put up much of a fight. He just stood there, staring at me with those cold, empty eyes. The guys called the police, and they took Liam into custody. I found out later that he had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been arrested several times for similar incidents. He was a danger to women. I was terrified. I filed a restraining order against him and moved out of my apartment. I changed my number and deleted all my social media accounts. I was afraid he would find me again. It's been a few months now, and I haven't heard from him. I am still scared, though. I still have nightmares. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust someone completely again. Tinder's a dangerous place. You never really know who you're talking to. Be careful. Protect yourself. And if something feels wrong, trust your gut. Don't ignore the red flags. It could save your life. Looking back on it, I realized there were a few things I had missed. He always wanted to walk on the street closest to the buildings. I always thought it was weird, but now I know it was because he was trying to protect me from cars. He told me once that he had been in therapy when he was younger. I should have asked more questions, but I was so blinded by the attention that I didn't think to dig deeper. I truly regret letting this happen to me. Don't make the same mistake I did. Okay, so I've always been a pretty trusting person, maybe a little too trusting. I always try to see the best in people, give them the benefit of the doubt, you know? I figured everyone was basically good at heart. Tinder, though. Tinder tested that belief in ways I never imagined. This is why you should always trust your gut. I downloaded Tinder on a whim, honestly. I was bored, recently single, and all my friends were doing it. It seemed like a fun way to meet people, maybe find someone to go on a date with. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some lighthearted connection. My profile was pretty basic, a few decent photos, a short bio about my love for hiking and bad puns, the usual. I started swiping, and within a few days, I had a handful of matches. Most of the conversations were dull, the same predictable questions and tired pickup lines. But then I matched with Liam. Liam seemed different right away. His profile was intriguing, a mix of travel photos and artistic shots, with a bio that mentioned his passion for photography and his interest in philosophy. He seemed intelligent, creative, and adventurous, exactly the kind of person I was drawn to. Our conversations were engaging from the start. We talked about our favorite books, our travel experiences, our hopes and dreams. He was a great listener, always asking thoughtful questions and genuinely seeming interested in what I had to say. He was charming, witty, and articulate, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was excited, maybe a little nervous, but mostly optimistic. He seemed like a genuinely good guy, and I couldn't wait to meet him in person. When I saw him waiting outside the coffee shop, my initial impression was even better. He was tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. He was dressed casually but stylishly, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that I found incredibly attractive. The coffee date went well, or so I thought. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. There was a definite spark between us, a connection that felt genuine and exciting. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking about my family, my career, my passions. We talked about everything and nothing, and the time flew by. But there was this subtle feeling in the back of my mind. I felt a slight discomfort. After our date, Liam started texting me constantly. At first, it was sweet, a sign that he was really into me. But the frequency and intensity of his messages quickly became overwhelming. He would text me first thing in the morning and last thing at night, and throughout the day he would send me a barrage of messages, checking in on me, asking what I was doing, telling me how much he missed me. It was suffocating. I tried to gently push back, telling him that I needed some space, that I couldn't be constantly available. But he didn't seem to understand. He would apologize and promise to do better, but within hours he would be back to his obsessive texting. Then came the sleep-deprived phone calls. He would call me at all hours of the night, sometimes just to say he was thinking about me, other times to vent about his problems. I tried to set boundaries, telling him that I needed my sleep, that I couldn't be his therapist. But he would guilt me, telling me that I was the only one who understood him, that he needed me. It was emotionally draining. And then there was the jealousy. He became increasingly possessive, questioning me about who I was spending time with, what I was doing, where I was going. He didn't like it when I spent time with my friends, especially male friends. He would accuse me of flirting with other guys, even when I was just being friendly. It was exhausting and infuriating. My gut was telling me something was off, that this wasn't normal. I began to notice inconsistencies in his stories. He would tell me about his job, his family, his past, and the details would constantly change. It was like he was making things up as he went along. When I called him out on it, he would become defensive and angry, accusing me of not trusting him. He began love bombing. He showered me with compliments, gifts, and promises of a future together. He told me that I was the most amazing woman he had ever met, that he couldn't imagine his life without me. It was overwhelming and manipulative. I knew deep down that something wasn't right. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I was caught up in the whirlwind of his attention, blinded by his charm and his promises. I wanted to believe that he was the person he pretended to be, the person I had initially fallen for. And he knew that. He manipulated my desire to see the best in him. He would tell me that I was the only one who understood him, that I was the only one who could help him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be the one to fix him. But I couldn't, because that was the point. He was broken and needed me. So I wanted to fix him. One evening, Liam invited me to his apartment for dinner. I hesitated, but he was persistent, and I eventually caved. I was starting to feel suffocated by his constant attention. His apartment was a mess, cluttered with dirty dishes, clothes strewn everywhere, and a general sense of neglect. He was a slob, but I tried to ignore it. I was still trying to see the best in him. During dinner, he started drinking heavily. He became increasingly agitated, ranting about his ex-girlfriends, his family, his job. He was spiraling. I tried to calm him down, but it was no use. He was becoming more and more erratic, his mood swinging from angry to sad to manic. I told him I needed to leave, but he wouldn't let me. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. He began yelling at me, accusing me of not caring about him, of not understanding him. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. I started to panic. That is when I realized that I should have trusted my gut. I was finally getting to the point that I knew something was wrong from the start. That is when he pinned me to the ground. That is when he ripped my shirt. That is when I screamed at the top of my lungs. Someone heard me and called the police. They took Liam away in handcuffs. I pressed charges, and he was eventually convicted of assault and battery. I was lucky. I could have been seriously hurt, or even killed. The experience shook me to my core. I realized how naive I had been, how easily I had been manipulated. I learned a valuable lesson. Always trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how charming or persuasive the person may be. It's better to be safe than sorry. I'm still recovering from the experience. I'm in therapy, working through the trauma and learning to trust my intuition again. It's a long process, but I'm getting there. I'm also more cautious about dating. I take my time getting to know people, and I pay close attention to their behavior. I'm not afraid to walk away if something doesn't feel right. I've learned that my safety and well-being are more important than being polite or giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Tinder can be a fun way to meet people, but it can also be a dangerous place. It's important to be aware of the risks and to protect yourself. Trust your instincts, set boundaries, and don't be afraid to walk away from anyone who makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe. Your gut is usually right. Listen to it. It could save your life. Okay, so yeah, Tinder. I swore I was done with it, like a million times. Deleted the app. Promised myself I'd meet someone organically. Whatever that even means these days. But you know, boredom hits, loneliness creeps in. And before you know it, you're back, swiping through the endless stream of faces, hoping to find someone even remotely interesting. And that's how I met Ethan. His profile was decent, not overly curated, which I appreciated. A couple of photos of him hiking, one with a dog, and a bio that was short and sweet. Looking for someone to explore the city with. Good vibes only. Seemed harmless enough. We matched, and the conversation started off pretty normal. Small talk about our jobs, our hobbies, what we were looking for on the app. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a nice change from the usual hey, or some sleazy pickup line. We chatted for a few days, and he suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated. There was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Not a red flag, exactly. More like a yellow flag, a feeling in the pit of my stomach that told me to be cautious. But I ignored it. I'd been on so many boring, uneventful Tinder dates that I figured, what's the worst that could happen? We met at a cafe downtown. He was taller than I expected, with kind eyes and a shy smile. The conversation flowed easily, and we talked for hours about everything and nothing. He was smart, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. By the end of the date, I was actually starting to feel optimistic. Maybe this was it. Maybe I'd finally found someone worth sticking around for. He walked me back to my apartment, and we stood awkwardly on the sidewalk for a few minutes, unsure of how to end the night. He leaned in for a kiss, and I let him. It was okay. Nothing earth-shattering, but not bad either. We said goodnight, and I went inside, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan and I started spending a lot of time together. We went to movies, concerts, museums. He introduced me to his friends, and I introduced him to mine. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to genuinely care about me. He texted me every morning, called me every night, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. But the yellow flags kept popping up. Little things that I tried to brush aside, but that gnawed at me nonetheless. He was always a little too eager, a little too intense. He'd text me constantly throughout the day, wanting to know what I was doing, who I was with. He'd get jealous if I mentioned other guys, even in passing. He started making future plans for us, months down the line, talking about vacations and meeting his family. It was all happening too fast. One night, we were at his apartment, watching a movie. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was on my phone. He quickly put it down when he saw me, but I could tell he'd been going through my messages. I confronted him about it, and he got defensive, accusing me of hiding something from him. I told him that he was being insecure and controlling, and that I needed some space. He didn't take it well. He started crying, telling me that he was just afraid of losing me, that he'd never felt this way about anyone before. He begged me to stay, promising that he'd change, that he'd be less clingy. I wanted to believe him, but the pit in my stomach was growing larger, more insistent. I told him that I needed to go, that I couldn't deal with this right now. He followed me to the door, still pleading, still crying. As I was leaving, he grabbed my arm, his grip tightening. "Don't leave me," he said, his voice cracking. "I need you." I pulled my arm away, feeling a surge of panic. "You're hurting me," I said, my voice trembling. He immediately let go, his eyes widening in horror. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." I ran out of his apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my own apartment. The door locked, the chain bolted. I sat on the floor, shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I knew then that I had to end things with him. I couldn't ignore the red flags any longer. I sent him a text message, telling him that it was over, that I couldn't be with someone who was so controlling and insecure. He didn't respond. For the next few days, I was on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder. I was afraid that he would show up at my apartment or at my work. I told my friends what had happened, and they offered their support. They stayed with me at night, walked me to my car, and made sure I wasn't alone. Then, one evening, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated to answer it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling. "I know where you live," a voice said on the other end. It was Ethan. I froze, my blood turning to ice. "Leave me alone," I said, my voice barely a whisper. You can't get rid of me that easily, he said, his voice low and menacing. We belong together. I'm going to make you see that. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking so badly that I could barely hold it. I called the police, and they came to my apartment to take a report. They told me that they couldn't do anything until he actually did something, but they promised to keep an eye on things. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sent shivers down my spine. I felt like I was being watched, like Ethan was lurking in the shadows, waiting for his chance. The next morning, I woke up to find a note taped to my door. It was a picture of me, taken from my social media, with the words, "You can't hide from me," written across it in red ink. I called the police again, and they told me to file a restraining order. I went to the courthouse that day and filled out the paperwork. It was a long and stressful process, but I knew that it was necessary. The restraining order was granted, and Ethan was ordered to stay away from me, my home, and my workplace. I hoped that it would be enough to keep him away, but I was still terrified. A few weeks later, I was walking home from work when I saw him. He was standing across the street, watching me. He didn't say anything, didn't make a move. He just stood there, staring at me with a look of pure obsession in his eyes. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to run, but I was too scared to move. I just stood there, paralyzed with fear, until he finally turned and walked away. I never saw Ethan again after that day. I don't know where he went or what happened to him, but I'll never forget the fear that he instilled in me. This experience taught me a valuable lesson. Always trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't try to rationalize it away. Listen to your intuition and protect yourself. Tinder and dating apps in general can be dangerous. You never really know who you're talking to or what their intentions are. Be careful, be aware, and don't be afraid to walk away from a situation that feels wrong, because sometimes the yellow flags turn into red flags, and by then, it's too late. I still use dating apps, occasionally, but I'm much more cautious now. I pay attention to the warning signs, and I trust my gut. I know that there are good people out there, but there are also dangerous ones, and it's up to me to protect myself from them. Yeah, Tinder. I swore I was done with it, like a million times. Deleted the app. Promised myself I'd meet someone organically. Whatever that even means these days. But you know, boredom hits, loneliness creeps in, and before you know it, you're back, swiping through the endless stream of faces, hoping to find someone even remotely interesting. And that's how I met Ethan. His profile was decent, not overly curated, which I appreciated. A couple of photos of him hiking, one with a dog, and a bio that was short and sweet. Looking for someone to explore the city with. Good vibes only. Seemed harmless enough. We matched, and the conversation started off pretty normal. Small talk about our jobs, our hobbies, what we were looking for on the app. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a nice change from the usual "hey" or some sleazy pickup line. We chatted for a few days, and he suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated. There was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Not a red flag, exactly. More like a yellow flag. A feeling in the pit of my stomach that told me to be cautious. But I ignored it. I'd been on so many boring, uneventful Tinder dates that I figured, what's the worst that could happen? We met at a cafe downtown. He was taller than I expected, with kind eyes and a shy smile. The conversation flowed easily, and we talked for hours about everything and nothing. He was smart, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. By the end of the date, I was actually starting to feel optimistic. Maybe this was it. Maybe I'd finally found someone worth sticking around for. He walked me back to my apartment, and we stood awkwardly on the sidewalk for a few minutes, unsure of how to end the night. He leaned in for a kiss, and I let him. It was okay. Nothing earth-shattering, but not bad either. We said goodnight, and I went inside, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan and I started spending a lot of time together. We went to movies, concerts, museums. He introduced me to his friends, and I introduced him to mine. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to genuinely care about me. He texted me every morning, called me every night, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. But the yellow flags kept popping up. Little things that I tried to brush aside, but that gnawed at me nonetheless. He was always a little too eager, a little too intense. He'd text me constantly throughout the day, wanting to know what I was doing, who I was with. He'd get jealous if I mentioned other guys, even in passing. He started making future plans for us, months down the line, talking about vacations and meeting his family. It was all happening too fast. One night, we were at his apartment, watching a movie. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was on my phone. He quickly put it down when he saw me, but I could tell he'd been going through my messages. I confronted him about it, and he got defensive, accusing me of hiding something from him. I told him that he was being insecure and controlling, and that I needed some space. He didn't take it well. He started crying, telling me that he was just afraid of losing me, that he'd never felt this way about anyone before. He begged me to stay, promising that he'd change, that he'd be less clingy. I wanted to believe him, but the pit in my stomach was growing larger, more insistent. I told him that I needed to go, that I couldn't deal with this right now. He followed me to the door, still pleading, still crying. As I was leaving, he grabbed my arm, his grip tightening. "Don't leave me," he said, his voice cracking. "I need you." I pulled my arm away, feeling a surge of panic. "You're hurting me," I said, my voice trembling. He immediately let go, his eyes widening in horror. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." I ran out of his apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my own apartment. The door locked, the chain bolted. I sat on the floor, shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I knew then that I had to end things with him. I couldn't ignore the red flags any longer. I sent him a text message, telling him that it was over, that I couldn't be with someone who was so controlling and insecure. He didn't respond. For the next few days, I was on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder. I was afraid that he would show up at my apartment or at my work. I told my friends what had happened, and they offered their support. They stayed with me at night, walked me to my car, and made sure I wasn't alone. Then, one evening, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated to answer it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling. "I know where you live," a voice said on the other end. It was Ethan. I froze, my blood turning to ice. "Leave me alone," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You can't get rid of me that easily," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We belong together. I'm going to make you see that." I hung up the phone, my hand shaking so badly that I could barely hold it. I called the police, and they came to my apartment to take a report. They told me that they couldn't do anything until he actually did something, but they promised to keep an eye on things. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sent shivers down my spine. I felt like I was being watched, like Ethan was lurking in the shadows, waiting for his chance. The next morning, I woke up to find a note taped to my door. It was a picture of me, taken from my social media, with the words, "You can't hide from me," written across it in red ink. I called the police again, and they told me to file a restraining order. I went to the courthouse that day and filled out the paperwork. It was a long and stressful process, but I knew that it was necessary. The restraining order was granted, and Ethan was ordered to stay away from me, my home, and my workplace. I hoped that it would be enough to keep him away, but I was still terrified. A few weeks later, I was walking home from work when I saw him. He was standing across the street, watching me. He didn't say anything, didn't make a move. He just stood there, staring at me with a look of pure obsession in his eyes. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to run, but I was too scared to move. I just stood there, paralyzed with fear, until he finally turned and walked away. I never saw Ethan again after that day. I don't know where he went or what happened to him, but I'll never forget the fear that he instilled in me. This experience taught me a valuable lesson. Always trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't try to rationalize it away. Listen to your intuition and protect yourself. Tinder and dating apps in general can be dangerous. You never really know who you're talking to or what their intentions are. Be careful, be aware, and don't be afraid to walk away from a situation that feels wrong. Because sometimes the yellow flags turn into red flags, and by then, it's too late. I still use dating apps, occasionally, but I'm much more cautious now. I pay attention to the warning signs, and I trust my gut. I know that there are good people out there, but there are also dangerous ones, and it's up to me to protect myself from them. Okay, so this happened to me a few months ago, and honestly, I still get chills thinking about it. I am usually pretty good at reading people, picking up on red flags, but this guy completely blindsided me. I'd been on Tinder for a while, just casually swiping, not really looking for anything serious. You know, the usual, a few awkward dates, some decent conversations that fizzled out, and the occasional truly bizarre encounter. Nothing that really stuck with me, though. Until Liam. His profile was different, not in a flashy, try-hard way, but in a subtly intriguing one. He had a few photos. One of him hiking in what looked like the Pacific Northwest, another of him reading in a dimly lit coffee shop, and a close-up that showed his eyes, which were this really intense, almost unsettling shade of green. His bio was short and sweet, looking for good conversation and maybe some adventure. Let's see where it goes. I swiped right, and we matched almost instantly. He messaged me right away, and we started chatting. And I am not kidding, the conversation was amazing. He was smart, funny, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me, not just what I looked like or what I was doing that night. We talked about books, movies, travel, our families, our dreams, everything. It was like we had known each other forever. After a few days of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I was a little hesitant, You never really know who you're talking to online, but I was also really drawn to him. There was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on, a sort of magnetic pull. So I said yes. We met at a cafe near my apartment. He was even more attractive in person. Tall, with a lean build, that intense green eyes, and a kind of quiet confidence that I found incredibly attractive. We talked for hours. The conversation flowed effortlessly, just like it had online. It felt easy. Too easy, maybe. But I ignored that little voice in the back of my head. We started seeing each other regularly. We went to movies, concerts, art galleries. We cooked dinner at each other's apartments. He was always so attentive, so thoughtful, so perfect. He remembered the little details, my favorite flower, the name of my childhood pet, the specific type of tea I liked. He seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. My friends were a little skeptical. They said he seemed too good to be true. They warned me about love bombing and manipulation, but I brushed it off. I told them they were just jealous. I was falling hard for Liam, and I didn't want anyone to ruin it for me. Then things started to get weird. It started with small things. He would show up at my apartment unannounced, saying he was just in the neighborhood and wanted to surprise me. At first, it was sweet, but then it started to feel intrusive. He would ask me about my schedule, my friends, my family, in excruciating detail. He wanted to know everything about my life. He also started getting jealous. He didn't like it when I went out with my friends, even if he was busy. He would call and text constantly, wanting to know where I was and who I was with. He started accusing me of flirting with other guys. I tried to reassure him that he was the only one for me, but it didn't seem to matter. One night, I was at a party with my friends, and Liam showed up without telling me. He said he couldn't stand being away from me and wanted to surprise me. But he was acting off. He was quiet and withdrawn, and he kept glaring at the other guys at the party. He pulled me aside and started whispering in my ear, telling me how much he loved me and how he couldn't live without me. It was intense and overwhelming. I tried to get him to relax and enjoy himself, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept clinging to me, his grip tightening with each passing minute. Finally, I told him I needed some air and went outside. He followed me. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice tight. "I just need some space," I said. "You're being a little intense." He stared at me, his eyes narrowed. "Intense," he said. "I am just showing you how much I care about you." "I know, but it's too much," I said. "I need you to back off a little." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then his expression changed. His eyes went cold and his jaw clenched. "You don't appreciate me, do you?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. You don't realize how lucky you are to have me. I took a step back, suddenly afraid. Liam, you re-scaring me, I said. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that sent shivers down my spine. Scared, he said. You should be. He lunged at me, grabbing my arm. His grip was so tight that it hurt. You re-mine, he hissed. You belong to me. I struggled to break free, but he was too strong. He dragged me toward his car, his grip tightening with each step. I started screaming. Luckily, someone heard me. A couple of guys from the party came running outside and pulled Liam off of me. He didn't put up much of a fight. He just stood there, staring at me with those cold, empty eyes. The guys called the police, and they took Liam into custody. I found out later that he had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been arrested several times for similar incidents. He was a danger to women. I was terrified. I filed a restraining order against him and moved out of my apartment. I changed my number and deleted all my social media accounts. I was afraid he would find me again. It's been a few months now, and I haven't heard from him. I am still scared, though. I still have nightmares. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust someone completely again. Tinder's a dangerous place. You never really know who you're talking to. Be careful. Protect yourself. And if something feels wrong, trust your gut. Don't ignore the red flags. It could save your life. Looking back on it, I realized there were a few things I had missed. He always wanted to walk on the street closest to the buildings. I always thought it was weird, but now I know it was because he was trying to protect me from cars. He told me once that he had been in therapy when he was younger. I should have asked more questions, but I was so blinded by the attention that I didn't think to dig deeper. I truly regret letting this happen to me. Don't make the same mistake I did.